The moving truck hadn't even pulled away before Patricia Winters appeared on Megan Thompson's doorstep, designer sunglasses perched atop her highlighted bob, clutching a leather portfolio emblazoned with Willow Creek Estates in gold lettering. "Welcome to our little slice of paradise, Patricia. Please call me Tricia," announced with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. She thrust the portfolio into Megan's dirt-smudged hands. "Our community guidelines. You'll want to familiarize yourself right away. We pride ourselves on maintaining standards." Megan, exhausted from moving boxes all day, forced a polite smile. "Thanks, but I specifically bought this property because it's outside HOA jurisdiction. That's why I'm here." Tricia's smile tightened. "We may be rural, but we're still a community with expectations." Speaking of which, her gaze drifted to the livestock trailer parked in the driveway. "Someone mentioned you have animals." As if on cue, a loud, plaintive "amo-o-o-o-o" echoed from the trailer. "My rescue cows," Megan explained, straightening her shoulders. "4 of them, saved from a closing dairy farm." Tricia physically recoiled. Cows? Actual cows? Livestock really isn't the Willow Creek aesthetic. She flipped frantically through her portfolio to a color-coded section. Page 42, subsection C clearly states. "With all due respect," Megan interrupted, "this is a 10-acre farm property with agricultural zoning. The cows are staying." The standoff lasted 5 uncomfortable seconds before Tricia's face rearranged itself into a pained smile. "We'll circle back to this. In the meantime, you'll notice our guidelines on fence painting, lawn maintenance, and approved mailbox designs." Later that evening, as Megan settled her cows, Buttercup, Daisy, Ferdinand, and Clover, into their new pasture, she watched the sunset paint the old farmhouse golden. After years in cramped suburban neighborhoods with actual strict HOAs, this was her dream: space, freedom, and her beloved rescue animals. She glanced at Tricia's portfolio, now serving as a coaster for her celebratory wine glass, and raised a toast to her cows. To no more busybodies telling us what to do. Little did she know that from her kitchen window across 2 properties, Tricia watched Megan's farm through binoculars, meticulously noting violations in a leather-bound notebook labeled "INFRECTIONS," her perfectly manicured finger already dialing another neighbor. "Emily? It's Tricia. We have a situation. The new resident has brought livestock. Yes, actual barnyard animals. We need an emergency board meeting." The first few weeks at Willow Creek proved more challenging than Megan had anticipated. Each morning seemed to bring a new note pinned to her mailbox or tucked under her windshield wiper. "VI, a lady, upon." Unapproved wind chimes, read one. "Notice. Inappropriate garden gnome attire," said another, referring to the cheerful ceramic figure wearing overalls that Megan had placed near her front step. What started as an annoyance quickly became laughable. Megan created a wall of shame in her kitchen, taping each ridiculous citation next to her calendar. She took particular pleasure in adding the notice about her excessively tall sunflowers, creating unwanted shade patterns on neighboring properties. Despite Tricia's campaign of harassment, Megan found unexpected allies. Old Mr. Jenkins from the property to the east stopped by one afternoon with a basket of homegrown tomatoes and a conspiratorial wink. "Don't let Tricia the Terrible get to you," he advised, watching as Ferdinand playfully chased butterflies across the pasture. "She moved here from some fancy gated community in Phoenix 3 years ago and immediately decided our little rural road needed organizing, been terrorizing folks ever since." "But why does everyone put up with it?" Megan asked, offering him iced tea on her porch. Mr. Jenkins sighed. "Most of us are just trying to live peacefully. Easier to paint the mailbox around them," the guests murmured. Several neighbors looked at Tricia with new understanding. "That can't be right," one woman said. "Tricia told us you were thrilled to host. And she said the HOA board had unanimously approved using your property," added another. "There is no legal HOA here," Megan explained. "I checked with the county office." All eyes turned to Tricia, who had crumpled onto a miraculously unscathed chair, her lavender dress smudged with dirt. Lauren walked slowly toward Megan, carefully skirting Ferdinand, who was contentedly chewing on a centerpiece. "Did my mother really force you to host our wedding?" she asked quietly. Megan nodded. "I'm sorry, Lauren. I didn't want to ruin your day. I just wanted to be left alone on my own property." To everyone's surprise, Lauren started laughing, a slightly hysterical sound at first, then genuine amusement. "Actually, I never wanted a big wedding. This was all Mom's idea." She gestured around at the chaos. "But I have to admit, this is going to be a much better story than a perfect ceremony would have been." She turned to her bewildered groom, who had approached cautiously. "What do you say we take everyone to that pizza place in town, then go to the courthouse on Monday?" As the wedding party began to disperse, some helping to collect scattered gifts, others taking selfies with the cows, Megan approached Tricia, who sat alone, defeated. "The community association will hear about this," Tricia muttered. "There is no association, Tricia, just neighbors. And neighbors don't force their way onto each other's property or threaten each other with fake fines." Megan's voice was firm but not unkind. "My home is not your venue. My land is not your event space. And my cows have more right to be here than any wedding party." Later that evening, after everyone had gone, Megan sat on her porch with a glass of wine, her cows peacefully grazing nearby, the setting sun casting long shadows across her land. She smiled, watching Daisy, who was still wearing a piece of white fabric on one horn like a trophy. The next day, the story of the wedding ruined by rescue cows spread through Willow Creek. To Megan's surprise, most of her neighbors stopped by, not to complain, but to introduce themselves properly and share their own stories of Tricia the Terrible. One elderly couple brought homemade bread and admitted they'd been intimidated by Tricia for years. Within a month, the neighbors had formed a genuine community association, one focused on actual community support rather than rules enforcement. They held their first meeting in Megan's barn, with her cows as honorary members. And Tricia, she put her house up for sale the following week, citing a need for a more structured neighborhood environment. Nobody was particularly sad to see her go. As for Lauren and her groom, they sent Megan a thank you card after their courthouse wedding. It featured a hand-drawn cow wearing a veil, along with a gift certificate for premium cattle feed. "Thanks for teaching Mom a lesson about boundaries," the note read. "Best wedding story ever." The week passed in a blur of increasingly invasive preparations. Tricia's wedding machine was ruthlessly efficient, transforming Megan's peaceful farmstead into something from a rustic chic Pinterest board. Rental companies delivered endless items: chairs, tables, a dance floor, portable restrooms. "Your plumbing simply won't handle our guests," Tricia had declared, and an enormous tent, just in case of weather, which now dominated the pasture like a circus big top. Megan had smiled through it all, projecting a calm helpfulness that clearly unnerved Tricia, who had expected resistance. The only boundary Megan had firmly maintained was keeping strangers away from her cows, who were now temporarily housed in the far pasture behind a small rise. "They're very sensitive rescue animals," she'd explained to the frustrated wedding coordinator. "They've been traumatized enough without 60 strangers trying to pet them for Instagram photos." By Saturday morning, Megan's property was unrecognizable. An army of workers had descended at dawn, setting up white chairs facing an arch by the creek, stringing fairy lights in the oak trees, and arranging flower-laden tables. A catering team had commandeered her garage, which now housed 3 portable ovens and a makeshift bar. Worse, Tricia had somehow convinced the wedding party that Megan's charming farmhouse would make the perfect backdrop for getting ready photos, resulting in Megan being essentially evicted from her own home as bridesmaids in matching robes took over her bedroom and bathroom. She'd retreated to the barn, where she'd set up a folding chair and a cooler of iced tea, watching the chaos unfold through the open barn door. Miss Thompson, a woman in a wedding COO Gayanita t-shirt, poked her head into the barn. "We're having a slight issue with the cake delivery. They need access to electricity, but the catering team is using all available outlets in the garage." "That sounds like a problem for Mrs. Winters," Megan replied pleasantly, taking a sip of tea. The coordinator's professional smile faltered. Mrs. Winters suggested we run an extension cord from your barn. Did she? Megan glanced meaningfully at the bare bulb overhead, the only electrical fixture in the rustic structure. I'm afraid that's not possible. Fire hazard. But Mrs. Winters said, perhaps Mrs. Winters could check her extensive budget for a generator rental. I hear they deliver same day for emergencies. Megan smiled sweetly. Good luck. As the day progressed, guests began arriving at 3, dressed in summer finery, exclaiming over the pastoral beauty of the setting. Megan watched from her hidden vantage point as Tricia fluttered about in a lavender mother-of-the-bride dress, accepting compliments on finding such a charming rustic venue. Not once did she acknowledge that the property belonged to someone else, or that Megan existed at all. Your plan better be worth all this, Megan muttered to Ferdinand, who had wandered back to the barn for comfort amid the unusual activity. The gentle giant nuzzled her shoulder sympathetically. At precisely 3:30, Megan checked her watch and reached for her phone. She had prepared meticulously all week, researching bovine digestion and consulting with experts. Now it was showtime. Dr. Reynolds? It's Megan Thompson. She stroked Ferdinand's massive hand as she spoke. Yes, everything's fine with the herd. I'm just calling to let you know I won't need you to come out for that appointment after all. The cow's stomach issues seem to have resolved themselves. She paused, trying not to laugh. Yes, the special feed you suggested worked perfectly. They're much less gassy now, and that new training whistle works like a charm. She hung up, her face splitting into a mischievous grin as she pulled a large bag from behind a hay bale, not regular cattle feed, but a special blend she'd express ordered after consulting with the livestock veterinarian. Rich with fiber and certain to produce digestive enthusiasm. She added a generous portion of dried blackstrap molasses, the bovine equivalent of irresistible cake frosting, and mixed it thoroughly. By Sunday afternoon, Megan's property had been invaded. A wedding planner, a harried young woman named Jessie, who kept apologizing while simultaneously measuring Megan's yard with laser precision, had arrived promptly at 8 a.m. I'm so sorry about the early hour, Jessie had said, wincing as she placed stakes with little pink flags throughout Megan's pristine backyard. Mrs. Winters insisted we start immediately. She, mentioned you might be difficult. Did she now? Megan folded her arms, watching as her peaceful sanctuary was mapped out for someone else's event. I mean, not difficult. Jessie babbled, just particular about your property, which is gorgeous by the way. That creek line with the oaks? Stunning. The wedding photos will be. She stopped herself. I'm sorry, I know this isn't ideal. As the day progressed, a parade of neighbors Megan barely knew dropped by with congratulatory comments about her generosity in saving Lauren's wedding. One elderly man patted her arm and said, Tricia mentioned you might need help moving your cows. My grandson can come by on Friday with his pickup truck. We'll get those stinky beasts out of sight for the big day. By evening, Megan realized with growing alarm that Tricia had mobilized the entire neighborhood against her. The woman was essentially staging a hostile takeover of her property and somehow positioning Megan as both the generous savior and the potential problem to be managed. Monday morning, Megan called in sick to her remote graphic design job and drove to the county office. The clerk at the Property Records Division, a woman with kind eyes and spectacular purple hair, listened to Megan's predicament with growing interest. Willow Creek Estates, you say? Let me pull that up. Her fingers flew over the keyboard, her brow furrowing. That's odd. There's no registered HOA for that subdivision. More typing. In fact, according to county records, those parcels aren't even officially designated as a subdivision. It's just a collection of rural properties with aspirational naming. So the HOA isn't real? Megan asked. Not legally, no. Any guidelines would be purely voluntary unless they were written into your deed restrictions, which, more typing, they definitely were not. The clerk looked up with a conspiratorial smile. Sounds like your neighbor is running a phantom HOA. It's more common than you'd think. Armed with this knowledge and printouts of her property documents, Megan stopped for a celebratory latte on the way home. She was about to call Tricia when her phone rang with an unknown number. "Hello, is this Megan Thompson?" The voice was young, female, and trembling with emotion. "Yes, who's this?" "It's Lauren Winters. Mom gave me your number. A sniffly breath. "I wanted to thank you myself for saving our wedding. When the venue canceled last week, I had a complete breakdown. 3 years of planning ruined. But then Mom said you offered your beautiful property, and I can't tell you what it means to us." Megan nearly choked on her latte. "Wait, your mother told you I offered my property?" "Yes," Lauren continued enthusiastically. "She said when she mentioned our situation, you were absolutely insistent. That you said it would be your honor to help. That's so incredibly kind of you, especially since we've never even met." Megan pulled her car over, realizing the depths of Tricia's manipulation. The woman had painted Megan as the savior to her daughter while simultaneously threatening her with bogus fines. Now if Megan refused, she wouldn't just be defying Tricia, she'd be crushing a bride's dreams days before her wedding. "Ready for your starring role, big guy?" she whispered to Ferdinand, who was already drooling at the sweet smell of molasses. She placed the mixture into 4 feeding buckets, strapped on her mud boots, and headed toward the far pasture, carrying her special training whistle. Meanwhile, back at the wedding site, the ceremony was about to begin. From her position behind the rise, Megan could hear the string quartet playing something classical and wedding appropriate. The guests had been seated, programs fluttering in the light breeze. Lauren, hidden from view in Megan's garage-turned-bridal suite, was likely having final adjustments made to her gown. Megan peeked over the rise and spotted Tricia standing at the back of the arrangement, ready to make her entrance ahead of her daughter. Even from a distance, Megan could see the triumph in her posture, shoulders back, chin raised, basking in her perfectly executed hostile takeover. "Timing is everything," Megan murmured to herself, placing the feeding buckets strategically around the far side of the rise, directly on the path to the wedding setup. She pulled out her training whistle, the one she'd been conditioning her cows to respond to all week with increasing enthusiasm. As the quartet transitioned to what was clearly the processional music, Megan raised the whistle to her lips and blew 3 short blasts. The signal that had come to mean molasses treats incoming to her food-motivated herd. Almost instantly, the eager mooing began. 4 massive heads perked up from grazing, ears swiveling toward Megan, and the irresistible smell of blackstrap molasses. "Come and get it, babies," Megan whispered, stepping aside as her rescue cows, each weighing well over 1,000 pounds, began lumbering enthusiastically toward the buckets, toward the treats, toward the path that led directly to a pristine white wedding setup populated by unsuspecting guests in their finest clothes. Perfect. Megan's special whistle, the one that always signaled treats, combined with the irresistible smell of molasses, had her 4 massive rescue cows thundering back toward their favorite feeding spot. And that spot happened to be directly through the wedding venue. "Them!" Tricia screamed, turning to Megan, who had appeared beside her. "Do something." Megan shrugged helplessly. "Once they smell blackstrap molasses, there's no stopping them. Don't worry, they're gentle giants. They won't hurt anyone." As if to prove her wrong, Daisy, the most playful of the herd, caught sight of the wedding arch with its fluttering white fabric. Mistaking it for a new toy, she trotted over and began enthusiastically rubbing against it. The arch wobbled, tipped, and collapsed with a crash, sending the minister diving for safety. Meanwhile, Clover and Ferdinand had discovered the reception tables. In seconds, the elegantly arranged centerpieces were scattered, the wedding cake was knocked sideways, and Ferdinand had developed an interest in the taste of white linen tablecloths. Lauren emerged from the garage in her wedding gown just in time to see Buttercup investigating the gift table, nudging wrapped packages with her massive head. The bride froze, her mouth open in shock. "My wedding!" Tricia wailed, mascara running down her cheeks, as she uselessly tried to shoo away Daisy, who was now wearing part of the arch's fabric wrapped around her horns like a bridal veil. Megan stepped forward, whistling a different pattern. Immediately, all 4 cows stopped what they were doing and ambled toward her, leaving destruction in their wake. The wedding site looked as if a small tornado had hit it. Chairs overturned, tables collapsed, flowers and food trampled into the grass. In the sudden silence, Megan addressed the stunned crowd. "I'm so sorry about this, everyone. I did try to warn Trisha that my cows get very excited around feeding time, especially when they smell their favorite treats, and they're trained to come back to this specific area when they hear my whistle." She patted Buttercup's massive flank. "Unfortunately, this is their home, and they have the right of way." She turned to Lauren, whose expression had shifted from shock to something more complex. "I truly am sorry about your wedding, Lauren. Your mother missold you when she said I offered my property. In fact, she threatened me with fake HOA violations when I refused." "It's going to be small," Lauren continued, her voice brightening. "Just 60 guests. And Mom said you even suggested we could take photos with your cows before you move them. That is super friendly." I told my photographer and he nearly exploded with excitement. Farm animals at a wedding. It's going to be so Instagram-worthy. Megan stared at her phone in disbelief. She'd never said any such thing. In fact, the idea of 60 strangers traipsing around her sensitive rescue animals made her blood run cold. She opened her mouth to correct Lauren, but heard the genuine hope in the young woman's voice. This wasn't Lauren's fault. "I need to speak with your mother," Megan said finally. "There seems to be some miscommunication." "Oh, well, she's actually right here. We're at the florist picking out centerpieces." The sound of the phone being passed over. "Megan, so glad Lauren called you." Trisha's voice oozed with saccharine warmth. "Isn't my daughter just the sweetest? I'll stop by this evening with some paperwork. CO." Click. The line went dead before Megan could respond. That evening, Trisha arrived unannounced, carrying a leather portfolio bulging with papers. She barged past Megan into the farmhouse kitchen. "Your home has potential," she said with the air of someone being extremely generous. "Now, just a few liability forms for you to sign," she explained, spreading papers across Megan's kitchen table. "And the wedding party wants to do a rehearsal Thursday evening. I told them 7 p.m. works for you." Megan took a deep breath, sliding the county documents forward. "Trisha, I never agreed to host this wedding, and according to the county, your HOA doesn't legally exist, which means your fines are meaningless." For a split second, Trisha's mask slipped. Her eyes flashed with something dangerous before her smile reasserted itself, now brittle around the edges. "But you did agree. We discussed it Saturday. I have witnesses who heard you say yes." She waved dismissively at the county paperwork. "And that's just a technicality. The association is in the process of being formally registered. That's not what happened, and you know it." "Lauren is so excited," Trisha continued as if Megan hadn't spoken, her voice taking on a tremulous quality. "She's been through so much, poor thing. First her father's illness last year, cancer, now this venue disaster. It would break her heart if anything else went wrong." The emotional manipulation was as heavy-handed as it was effective. Megan envisioned herself standing firm. The legal battle that might ensue, the social isolation in her new community, the heartbroken bride. Then she looked out her kitchen window at her beloved cows peacefully grazing in the evening light, and something clicked into place. A slow smile spread across Megan's face. "You know what? You're right, Trisha. Community is important. I'll host the wedding." Trisha looked momentarily surprised at the sudden capitulation, then triumphant. "I knew you'd come around once you thought about it rationally. Now about moving those animals." "Oh, don't worry about my cows," Megan said sweetly, her smile widening as Ferdinand chose that moment to let out a particularly resonant moo from the pasture. "I'll handle everything." Later that night, after Trisha had left with signed papers and a victorious strut, Megan sat on her porch swing with her laptop, researching bovine digestive systems and placing an express order with her agricultural supply store. Next to her, a notepad contained a hastily scrawled list titled Operation Wedding Crashers, with items including molasses treats, special training whistle, and waterproof boots for self. 6 months later, Megan had settled into a pleasant routine. Her farmhouse renovation was coming along, with the kitchen now sporting gleaming countertops and refinished cabinets. Her cows had flourished in their new home, with Ferdinand, once so skittish he'd barely eat, now playfully chasing butterflies across the pasture. Megan had even reluctantly attended one neighborhood potluck, where she'd met a few genuinely friendly neighbors who whispered warnings about Trisha the Terrible between bites of casserole. On a crisp Saturday morning in May, Megan was mucking out the cow pen, dancing to 80s rock blasting from her weatherproof speaker, when the music abruptly cut off. She whirled around to find Trisha standing at the fence line, designer sunglasses perched on her head, Megan's speaker in her manicured hand. That noise violates Section 8.2. Considerations of Community Auditory Aesthetics, Trisha announced, placing the speaker on a fence post. But we can overlook it. I need your backyard next Saturday. Megan stabbed her pitchfork into the dirt. You need my what now? Your backyard, for my daughter Lauren's wedding. Trisha spoke with the casual entitlement of someone who'd never heard the word no. She gestured impatiently at her phone. See the disaster I'm dealing with. Our venue just cancelled. Something about a burst pipe. We've been everywhere looking for a replacement. And you landed on my cow pasture? Megan said incredulously. Don't be ridiculous. Not the cow area. Trisha's face contorted as if she'd smelled something foul. She gestured toward Megan's sloping backyard that led down to a small creek lined with ancient oaks. That area. It's perfect for Lauren's rustic theme. The photographer already looked at my photos and said the light through those trees is exactly what we need. Your photos? From my property assessment documentation, Trisha said dismissively. The ceremony will be at 4, reception until 10. We'll need the cows moved, of course. It wasn't a request, it was an announcement. Before Megan could form a response, Trisha continued. The board has already approved it. It's for the community. Trisha, I'm sorry about the venue, but this is my home, not an event space. We'll pay you $200 for the inconvenience, Trisha interrupted. And we expect the area to be cleaned up, of course. No cow remnants. She wrinkled her nose at the wheelbarrow of manure nearby. My property isn't available for events, Megan said firmly, crossing her arms. I'm sorry about your daughter's venue, but you'll need to find somewhere else. Trisha's face transformed, the society smile replaced by something cold. I didn't want to have to do this. She pulled out her phone and began scrolling through photos. Violation. Section 4.3. Fencing must be uniform and painted in approved colors. Your fence is unpainted. She swiped. Violation. Section 7.1 prohibits visible storage of farm equipment. Your tractor has been parked outside for months. Swipe. Violation. Section 12.4. All auxiliary structures must be approved by the board. That hideous shelter you built for your cows was never submitted for review. This is a farm, Trisha, not a subdivision. It's part of Willow Creek Estates, and you agreed to the guidelines when you purchased. Another swipe revealed a spreadsheet with alarming numbers. The board can issue fines up to $500 per violation. I've documented 17 violations since you moved in. Megan did the mental math and blanched. That's $8,500. Trisha supplied with a predatory smile. Or you can help out a neighbor in need. That's what community is about, isn't it? Megan's mind raced through her options, none of them good. Her renovation had depleted her savings. She couldn't afford thousands in bogus fines, even if they turned out to be legally questionable. Trisha took her silence as acquiescence. Wonderful. The wedding planner will stop by tomorrow to measure. She turned to leave, her heels somehow not sinking into the soft ground, then paused. Oh, and we'll need your garage for the catering team, and your downstairs bathroom for the wedding party. As Trisha strutted away, Megan gripped her pitchfork so hard her knuckles whitened. Behind her, Buttercup gave a sympathetic moo and nudged Megan's shoulder with her massive head. I know, girl, Megan whispered, scratching the cow's forehead as a plan began forming in her mind. Don't worry, she has no idea who she's messing with. Beige, then fight about it. Plus, she's sneaky. Convinced some of the newer residents that her board has actual authority. He tapped the side of his nose. Between you and me, half the so-called board members don't even know they're on it. She just lists their names. The conversation was interrupted by the unmistakable sound of a camera shutter clicking. They turned to see Tricia standing at the edge of Megan's property, smartphone raised, capturing evidence of something. "Good afternoon, Patricia," Mr. Jenkins called cheerfully, waving his weathered hand. "Lovely day for spying on the neighbors, isn't it?" Tricia's face flushed crimson. She lowered her phone and stalked away, stiletto heels puncturing divots in the soft earth. "That woman needs a hobby besides terrorizing decent folks," Mr. Jenkins muttered. "She has one," Megan replied. "Being a nightmare." The weeks stretched into months, and gradually, Tricia's campaign against Megan's cows seemed to lose steam. Fewer violation notices appeared. The ominous click of camera shutters faded. Megan dared to hope that Tricia had finally accepted defeat or, better yet, found a new target for her controlling tendencies. One peaceful Saturday morning 6 months after moving in, Megan was enjoying coffee on her porch, watching Buttercup and Daisy graze contentedly in the morning sun. The farmhouse renovations were coming along nicely. She'd finally finished restoring the original hardwood floors, and the kitchen now sported gleaming new countertops. For the first time since arriving, she felt truly at home. Her phone chimed with a text from Mr. Jenkins. "Warren N. Tricia spotted at community mailboxes telling everyone about her daughter's engagement, planning massive wedding, looking for venue. Beware." Megan laughed and tucked her phone away. What did she care about Tricia's daughter's wedding plans? That had nothing to do with her or her farm. She couldn't have been more wrong.